"The police are here to see you, sir." My assistant's voice was shaking as she stood in my office doorway. Behind her, two detectives in dark suits waited with expressions that made my stomach drop. I was 34 years old, co-founder of Summit Digital Marketing, and I had absolutely no idea why detectives were in my office. "My name is Nathan Cross, and in the next 10 minutes, my entire life would be destroyed by my best friend and business partner." "Nathan Cross?" the lead detective asked, stepping into my office. "Yes, that's me." "What's this about?" "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of embezzlement and wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent." The words blurred together as they put handcuffs on me. Through my office window, I could see my employees watching in shock. I saw my business partner, Austin Ryder, standing near the break room with an expression I'd remember forever. Not shock, not concern, but satisfaction barely hidden behind a mask of surprise. That's when I knew. Austin had done this to me. Summit Digital Marketing was a company Austin and I had built together over 8 years. We'd started in my garage, two college friends with big dreams and zero capital. I handled creative and client relations. Austin managed operations and finances. The company had grown beyond our wildest expectations. We now had 40 employees, offices in 3 cities, and revenue approaching $20 million annually. We just signed our biggest client ever, a Fortune 500 company worth millions in billings. And now I was being arrested for stealing from the company I'd built. At the police station, the detectives showed me evidence. Bank records showing transfers from Summit's accounts to a personal account in my name. Emails discussing the plan to move funds offshore. Invoices for personal expenses charged to the company. Luxury cars, jewelry, a beach house. "Mr. Cross, the evidence is overwhelming," the detective said. "Your business partner, Mr. Ryder, discovered the discrepancies during a routine audit and reported it immediately. He's been very cooperative." "This is impossible. I didn't do any of this. Those aren't my accounts. I've never seen those emails." "Austin must have." "Sir, these transactions have your digital signature. The emails came from your company account. The personal account receiving the funds is registered in your name and social security number." I called my lawyer, Dennis Huang, who arrived within an hour. After reviewing the evidence, his face was grim. "Nathan, this looks bad. Really bad. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make this look like you embezzled over $2 million from your own company. Austin did this. He's framing me. I don't know how, but he set all of this up. Can you prove that?" "No. But Dennis, I'm the creative director. I don't even have access to the financial systems. Austin handles all that. He could have created these fake accounts and emails easily." "Which is exactly what the prosecutor will say you're claiming to shift blame." "Nathan," Austin came forward voluntarily. He reported the crime. From the outside, he looks like the honest partner who discovered his friend's betrayal. I was released on bail that evening, $500,000 that wiped out my savings. I went home to my apartment, and my girlfriend Cassidy was waiting. I'd called her from the police station, and I'd heard the doubt in her voice even then. "Nathan, what's happening? The news is saying you stole $2 million. "I didn't. Austin framed me. I don't know why, but he fabricated all of this." Cassidy's expression was carefully neutral. "Why would he do that? Your best friends? Business partners?" "I don't know. But I'm going to find out." Over the next week, everything unraveled. The Fortune 500 client pulled their contract, citing the criminal charges. Summit's board, which included Austin, me, and 3 outside investors, held an emergency meeting and voted to suspend me from all duties. Austin was named acting CEO. The investors I'd worked with for years looked at me with disgust. "We trusted you, Nathan. You've destroyed this company's reputation." "I didn't do this. Austin is framing me." "The evidence says otherwise," one investor replied coldly. "And frankly, your desperate accusations against the person who exposed you make you look even worse." Cassidy broke up with me. "I can't be with someone who'd steal from his own company." "I'm sorry, Nathan, but I have to think about my career. Being associated with you right now is toxic." I lost my job, my girlfriend, my reputation, and my future, all in 1 week. And Austin, the man who'd orchestrated it all, was being praised for his integrity and business acumen. I hired a forensic accountant to examine the evidence independently. After 2 weeks of analysis, he had troubling news. Mr. Cross, whoever set this up was very sophisticated. The fake accounts were created months ago. The emails have metadata that matches your computer and login credentials. The digital signatures appear legitimate. But they're not real. Someone faked all of this. I believe you. But proving it will be extremely difficult. The person who did this covered their tracks meticulously. My trial was scheduled for 6 months out. In the meantime, I was toxic in the industry. Nobody would hire me. My name was Mud. I lived on credit cards and the small amount of savings I had left after bail. I spent every day investigating Austin, trying to understand why he'd done this. We'd been friends since college, business partners for 8 years. What had changed? Then I found it. Buried in old company documents was a clause in our partnership agreement that I'd signed without reading carefully 8 years ago. If one partner was convicted of a crime involving the company, the other partner could buy out their shares for a minimal price, essentially pennies on the dollar. Austin could steal my half of Summit Digital Marketing for almost nothing if I was convicted. But there was more. I hired a private investigator to look into Austin's finances. What she found was stunning. Austin Ryder has significant gambling debts, the investigator reported. He owes approximately $3 million to various entities, some of them very dangerous. He's been desperate to find money to pay them off. Suddenly it all made sense. Austin had gambling debts he couldn't pay. He'd embezzled $2 million from Summit and blamed me for it. If I was convicted, he'd get my shares of the company for nothing and could sell the whole business to cover his remaining debts. I showed this evidence to Dennis. This proves motive. Austin framed me to cover his own embezzlement and steal my shares. It's a start, Dennis agreed. But we still can't prove he fabricated the evidence against you. We have motive but not proof. Then we need to get him to confess. Nathan, don't do anything stupid. If you approach Austin, he'll claim you're harassing him. It could hurt your case. But I was desperate. I arranged to meet Austin at a coffee shop near our office. He agreed, probably to maintain his image as the concerned partner trying to help his troubled friend. Nathan, I'm so sorry about all this, Austin said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. I never imagined you were struggling so badly that you'd steal from the company. Cut the act, Austin. I know about your gambling debts. I know you're the one who embezzled the money and framed me. His expression flickered, just for a second. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof? I will. And when I do, you're going to prison instead of me. Austin leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Nathan, even if you're right, and I'm not saying you are, who's going to believe you? The evidence points to you. I have documentation, witnesses, forensic proof. You have conspiracy theories and accusations. How do you think that plays out? I'll spend every dollar I have left fighting you. You don't have any dollars left. You're broke, you're unemployed, and you're facing 20 years in federal prison. Meanwhile, I'm running a successful company. Do yourself a favor, take a plea deal, serve a few years, and move on with your life. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I stood up and left, my hands shaking with rage. The trial happened 3 months later. The prosecutor presented the overwhelming evidence of embezzlement. The bank accounts, the emails, the fake invoices. Austin testified as a witness, playing the role of betrayed partner perfectly. Nathan was my best friend, he told the jury, his voice breaking. Discovering what he'd done, it was devastating. But I had a responsibility to our employees and our investors to report the crime. My defense was weak. We tried to argue that someone had framed me, that the evidence was fabricated, but we couldn't prove who or how. We presented the gambling debt information about Austin, but the prosecutor argued it was irrelevant and a desperate attempt to shift blame. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the verdict was guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced me to 8 years in federal prison and ordered me to pay restitution of $2 million, money I didn't have and hadn't stolen. I served 5 years before being released on good behavior. Those 5 years were the worst of my life. But they were also when I started planning my revenge. In prison, I read everything I could about business, finance, and forensic accounting. I studied cases of corporate fraud and how investigators uncovered complex schemes. I learned about digital forensics, money laundering, and how to trace hidden assets. And I stayed in touch with my private investigator, paying her with the little money I had left to continue watching Austin. What she discovered was fascinating. After my conviction, Austin had indeed bought out my shares for almost nothing. Then he'd sold Summit Digital Marketing for $40 million, $20 million more than it had been worth when I was arrested. Austin had paid off his gambling debts, bought a mansion, married a model, and was living the life I should have been living. But he'd also gotten greedy. According to my investigator, Austin had started a new company, Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, and was using the same embezzlement tactics on his new partners. I was released from federal prison on a cold October morning. I had nothing, no money, no job, no reputation. My parents had helped with a small apartment and some basic necessities, but I was essentially starting over at 40 years old. My first call was to Dennis, my lawyer. I want to appeal my conviction based on new evidence. Nathan, we tried that twice. The appeals court isn't interested. That was before Austin started running the same scam again. If we can prove he's embezzling from Pinnacle, it establishes a pattern that supports my claim that he framed me. Dennis was quiet for a moment. That's actually not a bad argument. But we'd need solid proof of his current fraud. I'm going to get it. I spent the next 6 months working 3 part-time jobs while investigating Austin. I couldn't use my real name. I was a convicted felon. But I could observe, document, and gather information. I discovered that Austin had 2 new business partners at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. I found one of them, Marcus Webb, at a coffee shop and introduced myself without revealing my identity. I'm doing research on marketing companies, I said. How's it working with Austin Ryder? Marcus's expression darkened. Between you and me? Something's off. The finances don't add up, and Austin won't let anyone else access the books. Sounds familiar. Has anyone suggested an independent audit? But Austin is the majority shareholder. He can block it. I gave Marcus my contact information, using a fake name, and told him to call if he ever needed help with a financial investigation. 3 months later, he called. I've been going through some documents I wasn't supposed to see. I think Austin is embezzling. The same pattern you'd see in a corporate fraud case. Fake invoices, shell companies, money disappearing. You need to report this to the authorities. I will. But I wanted to tell you first because, well, I looked you up. Your name is Nathan Cross, isn't it? You were Austin's partner at Summit Digital. My heart stopped. How did you know? Because I'm not an idiot. You show up asking questions about Austin, you're very interested in his financial practices, and you happen to have the same mannerisms as the Nathan Cross I found in news articles about the Summit embezzlement case. You were framed, weren't you? I met with Marcus in person. He showed me evidence that Austin was running the exact same scheme at Pinnacle. Fake accounts, fabricated emails, embezzlement disguised as legitimate expenses. This is identical to what happened to me, I said, reviewing the documents. Austin is using the same playbook. Which means he probably framed you. The question is, can we prove it? Marcus and I worked together over the next few months. He gathered evidence of Austin's current fraud while I connected it to the pattern from 8 years ago. We found the forensic accountant who'd worked on my case and showed him the new evidence. This is remarkably similar to the Summit case, the accountant confirmed. Same methodology, same types of fake documentation, same money trail structure. Either Mr. Cross learned from Mr. Ryder, or Mr. Ryder has been using this same scheme multiple times. Given that I was in prison and couldn't have taught him anything, I'd say option 2. We took everything to the FBI. The agent who reviewed our evidence was the same one who'd investigated me 8 years earlier. Mr. Cross, this is compelling. If Austin Ryder is running the same embezzlement scheme again, it does suggest he may have framed you the first time. But it's not definitive proof. What about the pattern? The identical methodology. It's suspicious. But it's not enough to overturn your conviction. We'll investigate Mr. Ryder's current activities. If we can prove he embezzled from Pinnacle, and if we can connect it to the Summit case, then maybe we can revisit your situation. The FBI investigation took 8 months. During that time, I worked as a consultant for small businesses, the only work I could get with a criminal record. I lived in a tiny apartment and saved every penny. Finally, the FBI arrested Austin Ryder on charges of embezzlement and wire fraud related to Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. The evidence was overwhelming. He'd stolen nearly $3 million using the exact same tactics he'd used to frame me. This time, though, he couldn't blame anyone else. Marcus had documented everything meticulously, and digital forensics proved Austin had created the fake accounts and emails himself. Austin's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wanted to go to trial. And that's when Austin made a mistake. He tried to use my case as precedent. My client is being railroaded just like Nathan Cross was 8 years ago, his lawyer argued. The evidence can be fabricated. The prosecutor pounced on that. Your client is claiming the evidence against him is fabricated the same way Nathan Cross claimed? That's interesting because this is the exact same pattern of fraud. Almost like someone used the same playbook twice. During Austin's trial, my lawyer Dennis filed a motion to introduce evidence from Austin's current case into my appeal. The judge, intrigued by the connection, allowed it. For the first time in 8 years, people started questioning whether I'd actually been guilty. The media picked up the story. Was Nathan Cross framed? New evidence suggests Austin Ryder used same embezzlement scheme twice. Reporters interviewed me, and I told my story carefully, with Dennis's guidance. I didn't accuse Austin directly, that would be defamation. But I laid out the facts. We'd been partners, I'd been convicted of embezzlement using a specific methodology, Austin had later used the identical methodology to embezzle from a new company. Let the public draw their own conclusions, I told one reporter. But yes, I maintain I was framed. And I believe Austin Ryder's current charges support that claim. Austin was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. At his sentencing, the judge made a pointed comment. Mr. Ryder, the similarity between this case and the Summit Digital Marketing case 8 years ago is striking. While I cannot speak to Mr. Cross's guilt or innocence, I can say that you have demonstrated a pattern of sophisticated fraud that raises serious questions about past cases. With Austin's conviction, my appeal gained momentum. The appellate court agreed to review my case in light of new evidence showing Austin had used the identical fraud scheme multiple times. My conviction was overturned 18 months after Austin's arrest. I was officially exonerated, my record cleared, and the judge issued a formal apology for the miscarriage of justice. Mr. Cross, based on evidence that Austin Ryder used the same embezzlement methodology in multiple cases, and given that he had both motive and opportunity to frame you, this court finds that your conviction was unsound. You are hereby exonerated of all charges. I stood in that courtroom, tears streaming down my face, and felt 8 years of anger and pain finally release. But exoneration wasn't enough. I'd lost 8 years of my life, 5 in prison, 3 rebuilding afterward. I'd lost my business, my reputation, my relationships. Austin had stolen everything from me. I filed a civil lawsuit against Austin for fraud, defamation, and wrongful conviction. The case was straightforward. Austin had fabricated evidence to frame me, stolen my share of Summit Digital Marketing, and destroyed my life. Austin's lawyers tried to fight it, but the evidence from his criminal conviction made the civil case easy. The jury awarded me $60 million, the value of my stolen shares in Summit, plus damages for lost earnings, emotional distress, and punitive damages. Austin didn't have $60 million. His assets were frozen, and his properties were seized. I didn't care. I didn't want his money, I wanted justice. What I really wanted was Summit Digital Marketing. After Austin had sold Summit to a private equity firm, the company had struggled. Without Austin's fraud propping up the numbers and without my creative vision, Summit had lost clients and revenue. The private equity firm had stripped assets and loaded it with debt. 5 years after my release from prison, Summit Digital Marketing filed for bankruptcy. The company I'd built in my garage, the company Austin had stolen from me, was being auctioned off to pay creditors. I'd spent those 5 years rebuilding my career. I'd started a small consulting business, grown it carefully, and attracted investors who believed in my exoneration story. I'd saved everything I could, invested wisely, and prepared for this exact moment. The bankruptcy auction was held on a Tuesday morning. I walked into the courthouse with my lawyer and my financing in place. The room was full of potential buyers, competitors, private equity firms, and bargain hunters. When Summit Digital Marketing came up for auction, bidding started at $2 million. It quickly escalated, $3 million, $5 million, $8 million. I waited until the bidding slowed at $12 million. Then I made my bid, $15 million. The room went quiet. People turned to look at me, and I saw recognition dawn on several faces. Nathan Cross, the exonerated founder, was bidding on his former company. $16 million, countered a private equity representative. $20 million, I said immediately. The private equity rep shook his head and dropped out. No one else bid. Summit Digital Marketing was sold to me for $20 million. Money I'd raised through investors, loans, and the partial settlement from my civil suit against Austin. After the auction, reporters surrounded me. "Mr. Cross, you just bought back the company you built and were forced out of. How does it feel?" "It feels like justice. Summit Digital Marketing was stolen from me 8 years ago. Today, I got it back." "What are your plans for the company?" "To rebuild it into what it should have been all along. To make it a company built on integrity, creativity, and honest business practices. Everything Austin Ryder's version wasn't." Over the next 2 years, I rebuilt Summit from the ground up. I brought back several former employees who'd believed in my innocence. I signed new clients by emphasizing our commitment to ethical business practices. I implemented transparency measures so that what Austin did could never happen again. The company grew steadily. Within 3 years, we'd surpassed our pre-fraud revenue. Within 5 years, we'd doubled it. Austin was released from federal prison after serving 10 years. He was broke, disgraced, and unemployable. His wife had divorced him, his mansion had been sold to pay his debts, and his reputation was destroyed. He called me once, about 6 months after his release. "Nathan, I need to talk to you. I have nothing to say to you, Austin. Please, just hear me out. I'm trying to rebuild my life, and I need a chance. You know what it's like to be convicted, to lose everything. Can't you give me the same chance you got? I was innocent, Austin. You framed me. We're not the same. I know what I did was wrong. I've spent 10 years paying for it. But I'm asking for mercy. For forgiveness." I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to help. I did know what it was like to have nothing, to be judged for a crime. But Austin's crime was real, and his victims included me. "Austin, I forgive you for what you did. But forgiveness doesn't mean I have to help you rebuild. You destroyed my life deliberately. I rebuilt despite you. Now you'll have to rebuild despite the consequences of your choices." So that's it? You get your company back, you get your reputation back, and I get nothing. You get exactly what you earned. I'm not going to punish you further, but I'm not going to save you either. You're on your own. I hung up and never spoke to Austin again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he eventually found work in sales at a small firm, using a different name to avoid his criminal history. He lived in a modest apartment and drove an old car, the exact opposite of the mansion and luxury lifestyle he'd built on stolen money. Some people said I should have helped him, that holding a grudge was unhealthy. But I didn't see it as a grudge, I saw it as boundaries. Austin had stolen 8 years of my life. I didn't owe him anything. Meanwhile, Summit Digital Marketing continued to thrive. We became known as a comeback story, the company that had survived fraud, bankruptcy, and scandal to emerge stronger. I used my platform to speak about business ethics and fraud prevention. I told my story to business students, entrepreneurs, and corporate boards. Austin Ryder taught me that you can never fully trust anyone with your business, I'd say. But he also taught me that the truth always comes out eventually. It took 8 years, but justice prevailed. 10 years after my exoneration, Summit Digital Marketing was valued at $100 million. I turned a bankrupt shell company into a thriving business worth more than it had ever been under Austin's fraudulent management. One day, I received a letter from Austin. It was forwarded through my lawyer, and I almost threw it away without reading. But curiosity won. "Nathan, I'm writing this not to ask for anything, but to acknowledge what I did and apologize. I destroyed your life because I was desperate and selfish. I framed you for my own crimes, stole your company, and let you go to prison for something I did. There's no excuse for that. I told myself I had no choice, that the gambling debts would get me killed if I didn't pay them. But that's not true. I had choices, I just made terrible ones. You lost 5 years in prison and 3 more rebuilding from nothing. You lost relationships, opportunities, and peace of mind. And you did it while innocent, which makes it infinitely worse than what I'm experiencing now. I'm in prison because I earned it. You were there because I put you there. I see now that framing you didn't just hurt you, it hurt everyone connected to Summit. Employees lost jobs when the company struggled. Clients lost trust. Investors lost money. All because I was too cowardly to face my own mistakes. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand the full weight of what I did, and I'm sorry. I hope you found peace and success. You deserve both. Austin." I read the letter several times. It was the first time Austin had genuinely apologized without asking for anything in return. Did it change anything? Not really. The damage was done, and no apology could give me back the years I'd lost. But it did give me closure. Austin finally understood what he'd done. He'd spent 10 years in prison thinking about his crimes. Maybe that was enough punishment. I wrote back, just one line, "I accept your apology. I hope you find a way to rebuild your life honestly." I never heard from him again, and that was fine. Our story was over. Summit Digital Marketing continued to grow. We expanded to 6 cities, hired 200 employees, and became one of the most respected marketing firms in the industry. I got married to a woman named Kelsey who'd known my story from the beginning and believed in me anyway. We had 2 children and built a life based on honesty and trust. Every year on the anniversary of my exoneration, I gathered my employees for a company meeting. I'd tell them the story of Summit's founding, Austin's betrayal, my wrongful conviction, and the long fight for justice. This company exists because of persistence and truth, I'd say. Austin tried to destroy it through fraud. But honest work and integrity always win in the long run. 15 years after my exoneration, I was invited to speak at a business ethics conference. The organizers wanted me to share my story as a cautionary tale about corporate fraud. During my speech, I talked about the warning signs I'd missed with Austin, his secretiveness about finances, his resistance to transparency, his gambling problem that I'd known about but dismissed as not my business. I trusted him because he was my friend, I told the audience. But business partnerships require more than friendship. They require accountability, transparency, and checks and balances. If I'd insisted on regular audits, if I'd paid attention to the financial irregularities, maybe I could have stopped Austin before he framed me. After the speech, a young entrepreneur approached me. "Mr. Cross, I'm in business with my college roommate. We're doing well, but he's been secretive about some financial decisions. Should I be worried?" "Yes," I said immediately. "Trust but verify. Insist on transparency. If your partner can't explain financial decisions clearly and show you the documentation, that's a red flag. Don't ignore it like I did." The young man thanked me and left. I hoped he'd take my advice and avoid learning this lesson the hard way. 20 years after my release from prison, Summit Digital Marketing was acquired by a major advertising conglomerate for $500 million. I negotiated the sale carefully, ensuring that all employees would keep their jobs and that Summit would maintain its independent brand and ethical standards. I walked away from the sale with $200 million after taxes and distributions to investors. At 60 years old, I was finally truly wealthy, not from fraud or theft, but from honest work rebuilding what had been stolen from me. I used $50 million to start a foundation supporting people wrongly convicted of crimes. The Cross Innocence Foundation provided legal assistance, job training, and financial support to help exonerated individuals rebuild their lives. I had resources and connections that helped me rebuild, I told the foundation's board. Most wrongly convicted people don't. They get released with nothing and are expected to just move on. We're going to change that. The foundation helped hundreds of people over the years. Each success story felt like a small victory over the injustice I'd experienced. I also wrote a book about my experience, Framed: How I Lost Everything and Rebuilt from Prison. It became a bestseller, not because my story was unique, but because it resonated with anyone who'd ever been betrayed by someone they trusted. One day, about 25 years after Austin had framed me, I got news that he'd died. Heart attack at 63. He'd been working as a sales representative at a mid-sized firm, living alone in a modest apartment. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sadness, just a sort of hollow acknowledgement that the man who'd destroyed my life was gone. I didn't attend his funeral. I sent flowers with a simple card. You taught me that the truth always prevails, even if it takes decades. Rest in peace. His ex-wife called me afterward. Thank you for the flowers. I know what Austin did to you. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Did he ever express remorse? In his final years, yes. He talked about you often. About how he'd destroyed the best friend he ever had because of greed and cowardice. It ate at him. Good, I said and meant it. Not with malice, but with a sense that justice had been served. Austin had spent the last 25 years living with what he'd done. That seemed like appropriate punishment. After Austin's death, several journalists asked if I wanted to comment on his life and legacy. I declined most interviews, but I did give one statement. Austin Ryder was a talented businessman who made terrible choices. He framed me for crimes he committed, and I lost 8 years of my life because of it. But I rebuilt, and justice eventually prevailed. His death doesn't change what happened, but I hope he found some peace before he died. I'm now 70 years old, retired, and living comfortably on the wealth I earned rebuilding Summit Digital Marketing. My children are grown and successful. My wife and I travel, volunteer with the foundation, and enjoy our grandchildren. Sometimes people ask me if I'm bitter about the years I lost. The answer is complicated. Am I angry that Austin framed me and I spent 5 years in prison for crimes I didn't commit? Of course. Those years are gone forever, and nothing can give them back. But am I bitter? Not anymore. Because those years in prison taught me things I never would have learned otherwise. They taught me resilience, patience, and the importance of fighting for truth even when everyone thinks you're lying. They taught me that success built on lies always crumbles eventually, and that honest work, even when it's slow and difficult, creates something lasting. Most importantly, they taught me who I am. I'm someone who survived being framed, convicted, imprisoned, and destroyed, and still came back to build something meaningful. Austin tried to destroy me to cover his own crimes. Instead, he set in motion a chain of events that ultimately led to his downfall and my triumph. Looking back on everything, from the day police arrested me in my office to the day I bought back Summit at bankruptcy auction to the day I sold it for $500 million, I see a clear pattern. Truth prevails, but it takes time. It took 8 years for Austin's fraud to be exposed. It took 3 more years for me to buy back Summit. It took another decade to rebuild it into something worth hundreds of millions. But every step of that journey was built on honesty, hard work, and refusing to give up even when everyone thought I was guilty. My business partner framed me for embezzlement and stole everything I'd built. He succeeded for 8 years, living in luxury on stolen money while I rotted in prison. Then his greed caught up with him. He ran the same scam again, got caught, and the whole house of cards collapsed. My conviction was overturned. His life was destroyed. I rebuilt bigger and better than before. The best revenge isn't just proving your innocence or even succeeding despite being torn down. The best revenge is building something so successful, so ethical, and so lasting that it stands as a permanent testament to the values your enemy violated. Austin Ryder framed me and stole my company. 25 years later, I turned that stolen company into a $500 million empire while he died alone and disgraced. Justice might be slow, but it's worth waiting for. And success built on truth always outlasts success built on lies. That's the lesson I learned from being framed, imprisoned, exonerated, and rebuilt. And it's a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life.